Hello and welcome to ConTinual, the convention that never ends. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and tonight we are going to be celebrating the 10th anniversary of Zombies Need Brains, the publishing house started by Joshua Palmatier, who's also with us tonight, as well as three of his editors. Welcome, Joshua, Edmund, Stephen, and Sam. I'm going to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves to the audience, starting with you, Joshua.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Palmatier. I am a fantasy author published by Daw Books. I have 3 trilogies out at the moment. You can get the entire first trilogy in Throne of Amancore, a big-ass fat fantasy for you there. The entire series all in one book. But I'm mainly here because I founded the small press Zombies Need Brains, and we're putting out the anthologies as fast as we can. And hopefully we'll say something intriguing tonight, a theme or an anthology that we've already done that piques your interest.
Okay, cool. Edmund.
Hello, my name is Edmund Schubert. I am primarily a short story writer, science fiction, fantasy, horror, a little bit of mystery. Was actually nominated for an Edgar once upon a way back on a short story for that. I've also been editing. I did Intergalactic Medicine Show online for 10 years. I've also done a variety of other editing, including 4 years as managing editor of a magazine called Diversity Woman. Do things like interview Maya Angelou and that sort of person. So very different world, but a lot of fun. And I'm really excited to be working with Joshua and Zombie Needs Brains. I've published a couple of short stories in their books. So I'm really happy to be on the other side of the equation again.
Great. And Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cottowicz. I am a science fiction and fantasy writer based in Canada. I'm about an hour west of Toronto, if that helps people get a sense of geography. A short story writer primarily, published a number of magazines and a number of anthologies. Won a few awards. I think the biggest one was I won the Writers of the Future Grand Prize once upon a time. I have a collection of my stories, some of my published stories out called 7 Against Tomorrow. I also host a podcast that is out as frequently as I can manage with 3 small kids at home and a full-time job. So that's about the life and times of Nikola Tesla, which is I've also drawn on in some of my fiction. And yeah, wanted to work on the other side. I have in the past worked as an editor for academic and scholarly books, so I wanted to work in sort of the fiction area as an editor for a while. So excited that these anthologies are hopefully going to work out, and excited to work with Joshua and Zombies Need Brains.
Great. And SC.
SC, otherwise known as Sam. I should probably put that in there, but professionally I'm SC Butler, because there have been one very famous Samuel Butler authors before me, if you know your Victorian literature at all. So I went with the initials. But Sam Butler, SC Butler, either way. I've been with Zombies Need Brains even before it was Zombies Need Brains. Was actually one of the writers in the very first anthology that Joshua and Patricia Bray, who is unfortunately not with us tonight, put together, which was the Josh, let me know if I get the title wrong. It was Tales from the Urbar. There we go, Tales from the Urbar. So I've got a long past, not of it particularly good, with Zombies Need Brains, both as a writer and as an editor. I think this might be my 6th or 7th editorial foray, doing Dragon-esque, if the Kickstarter succeeds. Most recently, I'm sorry?
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
Never fear.
Most recently, a couple of years ago, I self-published a novel called The Risen, a vampire novel, which of course, nobody cares about vampires anymore, but I had to write what I had to write. Before that, I have a trilogy from Tor called the Stoneways Trilogy, which you can probably only find if you come to me these days, though you might be able to get cut out versions on the internet. And If you want to look for me, look for SC Butler at facebook.com, or you could also find me at Mutable Books, which I very irregularly update as a webpage.
Okay, great. Well, Joshua, is it 10 years since the first anthology, or 10 years since you and a group of authors sat in a bar and said, what we need is more brains? So how did Zombies Need Brains come about, and when?
Okay, it's been longer than 10 years since we sat in a bar and decided we wanted to do an anthology. But it's been, this Kickstarter that's coming up is, or maybe starting today, is the 10th Kickstarter for us. So we've been doing Zombies Need Brains for 10 years, but it started a couple years before that, technically. So what happened is at a convention, we had a multi-author signing, and after the multi-author signing, all of the authors went to the bar, and
as one does, yeah,
as one does. And at the bar, I threw out this idea that we should write an anthology centered around a bar. And somebody threw in that it should be a time traveling bar, and somebody else threw in, I think it was Patricia that threw in, it should be bartended by Gilgamesh. And we came up with the title, After Hours, Tales from the Bar. And it happened that within a couple weeks, I was actually attending a convention up in Montreal, and I ran across John Helfers, who was an editor for Techno Books. And so I asked him, I was like, how do you like pitch an anthology and, potentially have like DAW pick it up or something like that? And he said, well, we're pitching the anthologies to DAW tomorrow. He said, if you can give me, the concept and a list of authors for it, he said, we'll pitch it. And so I ran back to my hotel room and typed up a description of the anthology and emailed a whole bunch of authors and said, would you like to participate? And got responses back. And so I got the pitch all together and gave it to him, and they pitched it to DAW, and DAW said yes. And so that's how Patricia Bray and I got started as editors. And then we pitched another one the next year, which was Modern Phase Guide
to Surviving Humanity.
Yep. And then we had a bunch of others to pitch. Only at that point in time, there was the kerfluffle in the publishing world, as happens often. And DAW ended up cutting back their anthology line. So they used to do like 6-8 anthologies a year. They cut it back to like 1 or 2, and it was always like a Mercedes Lackey anthology for Valdemar and whatnot. So we waited around a couple of years to see if they'd bring back the anthology line, and they didn't. And so finally I got tired of it, and the editing bug was itching. And so I said, well, I'll just create my own small press, as one does. And and put the anthologies out myself. And so Patricia Bray and I did a Kickstarter for Clockwork Universe, Steampunk versus Aliens. And
Yes.
And we managed to pull that Kickstarter off by the skin of our teeth. But that was essentially the start of Zombies at that point. And the plan was to do one anthology a year for like 5 years, and then maybe bump it up to 2, and then maybe bump it up to 3. And I only did 2 years with one. And then I had 2 really good ideas. So the 3rd year I bumped it up to 2 right away. And I mean, we were doing relatively well. So I think I only had 1 year where I did 2. And then the next year I went to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because you're crazy.
And yeah, it's been going well. I mean, the fact that we made it to year 10, I think, is shocking to me. I kind of just assumed when I got started that it would be a fun little ride for a couple of years, and then it would die out, and it's done not that.
And there have been a number of awards nominations along the way, and I think part of the key to your success is that you have managed to attract editors. Sam, how did you get involved in this party? I know where I came from.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I was involved when you went to 2. I think I came in when you went to 3. And he was desperate to con people he knew into doing this. Since I hadn't been selling much at the time, other than stories The Zombie Needs Brains, this seemed like a good way to keep my hand in the game. And so I jumped at the opportunity. And it's been very rewarding. I do think that for a lot of authors, one of the reasons their earlier books are often better than their later books is because they put more time into them and they get more feedback. They're less confident, so they need more feedback. And being an editor kind of helps you with that as a writer, I think. And so I've really enjoyed, the various books that we've read. That I've edited. That I don't know if I've enjoyed so much the fact we went from 250 submissions per book to, what was our record, 850 or something, that we, it's a lot of subs. And actually, you know what? The fact that we're getting a lot of subs is a wonderful statement of appreciation for how well Josh has been doing with this idea. That, we got this many people who want to submit to us is fantastic. So I look forward to having 1,000 subs.
You say that now. Okay. Well, you've heard, you've heard someone say that, this is a wonderful thing, and I hope that it proves to be the case for you, Stephen, and you, Edmund, because this is your first Zombies Need Brains, or your intro to the editing side of it. So how did you get involved with the editing side of it, Stephen? I mean, what drew you into the editing world? Was it an anthology you particularly wanted to edit, or did Joshua just come up to you with waving chocolate in front of your nose and say, "Come here, little boy, I have candy"?
No, it was more me begging and pleading, I think, for him to take on my idea. No, as I say, I for a long time had worked in publishing academic and scholarly books, and I was always acquiring. I always joke I had 2 degrees in history, and I never once acquired a book in history. It was always other disciplines. And I've written all these stories and published all these stories, but I've never been able to edit or acquire anything in fiction. And I thought, well, that's something I'd really like to try sometime. And I've had this idea for a while, and I was sort of talking to some people about, do you think this is a good idea? Who should I talk to? My very first publication was in one of those DAW anthologies that Techno put together, that was co-edited by Julie Cerneda. So, it's always been in my mind that, maybe that would be something neat to do someday. And anytime I was ever at a convention and there was a panel on, what it's like to put together an anthology, I was always sitting in the front row taking notes and that kind of thing. So, but I began to notice the Zombies Need Brains books more and more, popping up in awards, as you say, in my Facebook feed. People I knew were submitting and publishing in them, had only great things to say about working with Joshua and the press. So I just kind of emailed him out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you take just submissions randomly, just on spec?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, put something together." And so I did, and then we had a chat, and I sat on pins and needles for a little while he decided, and then I was lucky enough that he said he was interested in taking on this anthology with myself and my co-editor Tony Pye. So it was mostly just something I kind of had wanted to do for a long time, and Zombies Need Brains seemed a really great venue to do it.
Okay, what is the theme of the anthology?
Our anthology, so it's going to be called Game On, and the theme is games and gaming and sort of games in culture in sci-fi and fantasy.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. Edmund, you've edited a lot of fiction. I mean, Intergalactic Medicine Show, other projects as well. What made you come back to the torture?
Oh, honestly, a lot of it was just sort of, I stepped away for 2 years to work on my master's, and I was just looking for as many different opportunities as possible to get back into the genre because I just love it. But honestly, also part of it was just, I saw, take this as a testament. You're talking about how many earlier, Sam was talking about how many people are submitting now. Zombies is on my radar because they're just producing great stuff. I mean, I've had 2 short stories published in Temporally Out of Order and Temporally Deactivated, and they are purely from a reading enjoyment standpoint, 2 of the best anthologies I've ever been in. I mean, I think we've all seen anthologies where, they got some good stories and some great stories and a couple of clunkers. They were all good and great stories, and I just was really impressed with what Joshua was doing. And so he's not chasing anybody. Frankly, I nagged David Coe, who's edited a couple for Joshua, who's a good friend of mine, and I was like, all right, I'm going to hop on your coattails so that I can hop on Joshua's coattails, because I really want to get in on the zombie stuff, because it's great work. So I pushed David to push Joshua, and I'm very happy to be here.
Great, great. And I believe David was wasn't he the editor for Temporally Deactivated?
Yes, he was.
Okay, I know
Yes,
he was in Temporally Out of Order.
Yeah, he wrote a short story about a camera in that one, which is a wonderful story. And then Joshua tagged him to do some editing, and I think he's done at least 2 or 3. Joshua would know that better than I would, but David and I go way back. He and I met on the convention circuit in Tennessee in like 2007. We were at Chattacon, and they had dual guests of honor of Kevin J. Anderson and Robert Sawyer. But Chattacon was a really big gaming convention, so there were like no writers there. So David and I just like tagged on to Kevin and Robert and just went everywhere they went. We went to dinner with them, and we just sat there and listened. And after a while, we kind of realized, hey, there's this other guy sitting next to me who's closer to my level. Maybe I should get to know him a little bit too. And he and I became great friends. So it was a lot of fun. I love doing this. I'm really happy to be back.
Oh, wow. Well, you got 3 enthusiastic editors. Speaking as a writer, I think I should be afraid. Joshua, okay. Yeah, you've talked about how it growed. That, started with 1, got to 3, but this year, the 10th year of Zombies Need Brains production, the 10th year Kickstarter, there's so much going on. You've got a Kickstarter with 4 anthologies, and you've got a new magazine that is also run by the press. And, so I'm probably missing something there, because, could you tell us about all of the stuff that's happening now? Well, and plus the release of 3 anthologies from the Kickstarter in 2021. So, I mean, could you give us just a little bit of overview on that so that I can get Edmund and Stephen and Sam to talk about their anthologies in specific terms? I mean, Stephen's given us a bit, but I want to know what they want from their authors. So, but before we get to the stuff that the authors really want to know about, tell us about all the things.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising because I didn't realize that this was year 10 until like very end of last year, and because we were reading the submissions to the 3 new anthologies that just came out, like literally August 1st, and it suddenly hit me that I had made it to year 10 because I wasn't keeping track, and that this was going to be our 10th Kickstarter and coming up, and I was like, well, first of all, I was just astounded because I was like, like I said, I wasn't keeping track.
Where did the time go?
I was like, wow, 10 years already. And, you know, we have like, 19 anthologies out. And with the 3 new ones, it's up to 22 now. And
22 for 22?
But 22 now in year 22, yes. 2022. And so I was like, you know, it's year 10. I know a lot of small presses start up and then fold really, really fast. And the fact that we made it to 10, I said, we should probably celebrate. And so I said, well, how can we make it a big year? And try to make something of it. And so at this point, I already knew I was going to do 3 anthologies because I already had 3 themes that I was interested in. And so I said, well, if I have a 4th theme that I thought was really cool, then maybe I'll do 4. So that kind of got stuck on the back burner because I didn't have a 4th theme that I thought was really, really strong yet. And I wouldn't have gone to 4 unless I had a cool theme. And then I said, well, I've been kind of kicking around this magazine idea for zombies for a while. And I said, maybe I can get that off the floor this year as well. And so what happened, what kicked that off is, you know, as Sam said, we're getting tons and tons of submissions to our anthologies at this point. And what happens a lot with those submissions is that you find a really, really good story, but it's not really on theme. And so you can't take it for the anthology because it's just not on theme. So even though it's good. So I was running into some stories like that for the one that Sam and I were editing. And so I contacted all the other editors for all the other ones. And I said, you know, are there any stories that you thought were really, really good, but you can't take? And they got back to me with, I think I asked them to come up with like 4 each. And so they got back to me with those stories and I started reading those stories. And I didn't agree with all of them, that they were all great. I will say that. But a good majority of them I actually thought were really, really good. And so I said, okay, this gives me a good starting point for a magazine. I can get like the first yay many months using these stories. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger on the magazine. Like I said, it's been sitting in the background for a little while. And so the magazine's called ZNB Presents. And we run it through our Patreon. And what you do is you become a patron. And there's a couple different levels you can do that at. And so you get to read the stories and the illustration that goes along with the story. You get to see that as it comes out. And then at the end of the year, I'm going to do an anthology where I just compile all of the stories from the last year. And I'll release that as an ebook and a trade paperback. So if you're a patron, you're going to get that basically automatically. So that's what the 2 levels are for. If you join at one level, you get the ebook. If you join at the other level, you get the ebook and the trade paperback when it comes out. So that's what we're doing with the magazine right now. And we've gotten the first couple months out.
Yeah. Who's editing it? You only, or do you
at this point, it's just me.
Okay.
And yeah, we did an open call at the beginning of July because, like I said, I only had a couple stories from the previous, from what the editors picked out from the previous open calls. So I did an open call and I'm reading through those now. Hopefully I'll be done here soon with reading those, but it's just me reading and I don't have any like slush pile readers or anything like that. You know, if something piques my interest, then I mark it and hopefully I'll be able to fill out the rest of year 1 from that open call. And then on, you know, obviously, hopefully I'll be able to do a second open call for a second year, but we'll see how it goes. So that's the magazine, and that, like I said, that's already started up. We have a couple months of that at this point going on, and it's interesting because I'm not just doing the authors, but I also have the illustrations. So I'm dealing with artists as well here. I've only ever dealt with the cover artist, and Zombies has always used Justin Adams as our cover artist, and so I'm getting to play a little bit more in the artist realm and meet other artists. But
Are you soliciting the artist as well as the, staging open calls for art, or do you have a stable in mind?
Right now, I've basically got a little stable start. I have 3 artists that 2 of them are local, and one of them is basically my best friend from high school. So they're the ones doing the art at the moment. I do not have a plan yet to do like an open call for artists, but basically I'm waiting to see what happens with the magazine.
Okay.
We can definitely do 1 year of the magazine. I'm a mathematician, so I work the numbers. And I can do 1 year of the magazine. So we'll have to see how well it's received, whether or not I can do 2. And if we get to 2, then yeah, I'll have to start considering opening it up for open calls for artists and whatnot. Okay. But yeah, it all depends on how well it does.
Yeah, and how well the Kickstarter does, and all of the things that are there. Now, you said originally that you had 3 ideas, but you needed a 4th good idea to go forth. Was that your idea, Stephen? Game on?
No.
Nope.
I don't got me.
Okay, so
yeah, they don't know.
He turned my idea down.
I wasn't turned down.
I'm pretty sure it was me and David.
No, it was not you and David, actually. It was
well, we've narrowed it down significantly.
it was Patricia, the one that Patricia and I are going to edit, Solar Flare, the solar punk one. Basically, the other 3, I'd already agreed on the other 3, and then I do turn down, quote unquote, anthology theme ideas. But usually it's because I try to get the themes to pair up well during a Kickstarter. And so I usually turn it down because it doesn't fit well with whatever my other ideas are, whatever the other themes are. So I'm a mathematician, so I'm very calculating. And so yeah.
Who said that?
Everything is planned essentially, and so I'd already agreed to do a couple anthologies, and like Sam's idea didn't fit. Like I try to do a sci-fi-ish one and a fantasy one, and maybe an urban fantasy one. I try to get a variety there.
Balance the subgenres, as it were.
Yes, okay. Yes, and I try to do that in the anthology itself. I don't want an anthology that's all dark stories. I want an anthology that has humorous ones and dark ones and medium tone ones and whatnot. So I'm always trying to emphasize variety. Before I even started the small press, I said, if I'm going to do this, I should probably read a lot of anthologies. And so I started reading a lot of anthologies, and I took note of what I did not like about anthologies, certain anthologies, and what I did like about certain anthologies. So I kind of, one of the things was I read a couple anthologies where I was like, this anthology is like one note. Like every story is basically exactly the same story. And I was like, I did not enjoy that. So one of my founding principles, I guess, is that we got to have variety. So,
Stephen.
Well,
sorry. Yes.
I said, I hope you're taking notes.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Well, the entire panel will be broadcast on ConTinual. So the record is there. All you need to do is transcribe it. Speaking of which, while you're taking notes, Stephen, can you tell us a bit about, I mean, you mentioned the anthology Game On. Could you tell folks exactly what you're hoping to get out of the anthology, and the kinds of stories you're looking for, or the kinds of stories you're not?
Well, I mean, really, I think it comes down to something that can surprise and delight me as a reader, primarily, first of all, and my co-editor. It strikes me that we really live in kind of a golden age of games and gaming, and the Venn diagram of people who enjoy science fiction and fantasy and who also enjoy games of one variety or another is probably a complete overlap almost. But there's actually been, comparatively little science fiction and fantasy that really focuses on kind of games and what they can tell us about ourselves and the kinds of games we choose to play, and what they might represent in a fantasy setting or a science fiction setting. Which can be matters of life and death. It can be matters of, the end of the world, all these kinds of things. So, what I'm really hoping to see is, how games can reflect character and sort of tell us about ourselves and tell us about the characters in the story. I want to see stories about real world games. And a number of our anchor authors are doing stories about real world games, but I really want to see made up things. What would alien games look like? What would games in the future look like? What would games played by ogres look like? Like fantasy settings, all kinds of things, right? I'm looking really clever takes on things. One thing that people have to be aware of is, for copyright reasons, we can't use specific games unless we do it very carefully and maybe don't mention names and sort of hint, around. So, something that's really well written, but is really clever and something that surprises me and is something like, wow, I've never seen something like that before. I never would have thought of that use of the game or that interpretation of the theme. Those would be what I'm looking for. I feel like we're probably going to get a lot of fantasy submissions. I would really like to see some science fiction submissions as well. I'd really love some humor. I have something that can make me laugh or bring a smile to my face while telling a really compelling story, I think would be really appealing to me. Something with a positive outlook, not, uniformly. I think Joshua's idea of variety of different tones and shades of storytelling is really the right thing that's in my mind. But there's been a lot of downers in the real world lately. So, a few stories here and there that have a little bit of a ray of hopefulness or a happy ending. Again, not everything, but I think having those notes in the anthology would be really something that would appeal to me as a reader and certainly appeal to me as an editor.
Okay, cool. Sam,
I would say, Stephen, you should probably add in what you don't want, right? You don't want like football stories and sporting stories.
Yeah. So think of it as, so anything that would be like a sport, whether real world or made up, like rollerball or Quidditch or something like that. That's not, I'm sure there'd be great stories, not a fit for this anthology. We're looking at things like, traditional board games, video games, tabletop role playing, esports, reality show kind of competition games, anything like that. We're not really looking for sports with this one.
Okay, cool. Sam, you're tackling dragons in your anthology. Tell us a little bit about Dragon-esque and Game On, you said Dragon-esque, and what you're hoping to see there in terms of stories about dragons from the dragon's point of view.
Well, that's what you just said. That's the key point. It's stories about dragons from the dragon's point of view. Other than that, just about anything goes. In typical zombies need brains fashion, we're looking for, if you can come up with a science fiction version, that would be great. You're going to go, if it's decently written, it's going to go into our second read list almost automatically, because I don't imagine we're going to get a lot of science fiction dragon stories. We may not get any. But we like to look for all things across genres. We like to look for horror ones where the dragons are particularly malevolent. We love humor. We always love humor. It's I think one of the trademarks of Zombies Need Brains is the fact that we do want funny stories. As an editor, I can tell you, if you can write good humor, you got a leg up for getting into one of our anthologies, because it is really hard to do. I think a lot of people don't understand how hard it is to do, and or maybe they do understand how hard it is to do and shy off it. But we're always looking for humor. We expect we're going to get a lot of fantasy stories. Dragons are the very essence of fantasy in many ways, unless it's unicorns or forgotten kings. But so know in advance, if you're writing a fantasy dragon story, it's going to be really, really good. It's going to have to be different. It's going to have a point of view that makes it different from the other stories, because we're going to get a lot of them. And if all we get is another dragon brooding on its hoard, or another dragon's, dragon sex stories in the air, like certain other books that we know of. I mean, that's not what we're really looking for. We're looking for something different. So put your thinking cap on, try to get a new angle to do it. But we're looking for something across genres: humor, horror, fantasy, science fiction,
mystery.
It's open. It's typical. It's a typical Zombies Need Brains. We expect a lot of submissions because people love dragons, and we love dragons too. So we're ready to read them. So send us what you got, and try to make it a little different. And that's all we ask for.
Anything they should avoid other than strange dragon sex, unless they can really make you like the dragon sex.
If they can do a strange dragon sex in a really new way that hasn't been done before, well, we'll certainly take a look at it. But for actually avoiding things, just avoid the cliches. I think that's what's really important, is to avoid the cliches. Try to think of something that will set your story apart from all the other stories that we assume. Maybe we're going to be wrong. Maybe we're only going to get 200 dragon stories. I would be very surprised. But I think even if we only get 200 dragon stories, what we're going to be looking for is stories that show something new and show something different. So I would say avoid the cliches if at all possible, unless you're someone who's really talented. And I know I can think of a few authors already who do this, in which you take all the cliches and you stand them on top of their head in a humorous way. That we would probably love.
Cool.
Josh, you have anything as the co-editor? You have anything you want to add?
I guess the only thing I would add is that a significant part of the story has to be the dragon's point of view. It doesn't have to be completely the dragon's point of view, but the story needs to hinge on the fact that it's the dragon's point of view. So yeah, you can go outside the dragon's point of view. That's fine. Just you can't have the whole story be outside the dragon's point of view. And that's what I'm afraid we're going to see in a lot of the submissions, is that, we're going to read a submission and, it might be a great story, but by the time we get to the end, we're going to say we were never in the dragon's head. And the point of the anthology is to see the dragon side of it, essentially. So make sure you're focusing on the dragon and his point of view, or her point of view.
Yes. Her point of view, not a lot of female dragons out there. And I confess I'm guilty on that ground too, not having written a female dragon. But yeah, that's something. Edmund, yours is the only anthology we don't have a title for or theme. Could you talk to us about it?
Sure. Well, so the title and the theme is Artifice and Craft. And what we're looking for are stories of either enchanted or cursed works of art. The obvious example is the picture of Dorian Gray, that sort of thing. So sort of echoing what's already been said, David and I have had multiple conversations where we're expecting a lot of fantasy. We actually were trying to figure out how you would take this in a science fiction direction. You know, could you come up with an enchanted or a cursed NFT, maybe something like that? Of course, now I
Ghost
say
in the
that out loud, and we'll
machine.
get 50 stories about
Yes,
enchanted
exactly.
NFTs. But
Isn't that all of them? Aren't they all cursed though? You know, fundamentally.
One's cell
so
phone, definitely. I
there
mean,
you go.
they have something called Ghost Touch now, where you don't necessarily open apps. Your phone, because of something they can't control, opens the apps for you. And my husband and I are suffering through that at the moment. So I can definitely see how a cursed object could be in a science fictional setting. And didn't Guy de Maupassant do something called The Necklace, which was all about a piece of jewelry that was poisoned and how it could be passed from hand to hand until the universe decided to destroy one person?
I'm not familiar with it, but I'm intrigued. But yeah, so we do expect a lot more fantasy and horror too. If you're going to go down the cursed route, horror is a little bit easier. But to a certain extent, I feel like I'm definitely repeating what's been said. There are a lot of cliches, and if you can find a way to stand that cliche on its head, great, or take me in a completely different direction, show me something that surprises me, or at least makes me think differently about something that I've seen before. I mean, frankly, I'm at a point as an editor that I appreciate that. Take the obvious thing and then somehow just yank it by its guts and turn it inside out and show it to me in a completely new and interesting way. And you will definitely have my attention.
Great. Okay. And the Kickstarter is starting as of this filming on August the 15th, correct? And, it is I will put a link in the credits so people can find it. But before we get the Kickstarter, we've got 3 wonderful Zombies Need Brains anthologies coming out this in the beginning of August for people who want to get their hands on the latest and greatest Zombies Need Brains. So could you all tell us about it? I mean, this is primarily, I think, for Joshua and Sam. Could you tell us about this year's the 2022 publications?
So Sam, go ahead with ours.
Okay. Josh and I edited Brave New Worlds, with apologies to Mr. Huxley. Yeah, I don't have my copy yet. I could have splashed it up too.
I literally got this today.
Did you get it today? Hopefully mine will come tomorrow or before the end of the week. We actually have a story. One of our anchor orders wrote a story loosely based on Huxley, a retelling, not a retelling, but an extrapolation of the Brave New World into an interplanetary society, which is very, very interesting. But it was a very interesting concept to edit. And what Josh said earlier about having stories that were really great but didn't quite work for theme was really true. We had, I would say, 2 or 3 of the best submissions we had from just the over the transom submissions were very close. In fact, they would have been great fits for the previous anthology, When Worlds Collide, but they didn't really work as Brave New World stories. They were so good that we even toyed with the idea of expanding the concept a little bit, and then we decided that was not a good precedent to set. That we had to really, keep the stories applicable. And we did get some great stories. One of my favorites, I think, that I've ever edited, it is a funny story, which are always among my favorites, about not a copier. I'm having a mind blank, Josh. What's the word I'm looking for? The 84 stands. A printer.
3D printer.
A 3D printer malfunctions at the beginning of a 3D printing intergalactic colonization project, and it is a wonderful, wonderful story. I think it's one of the best stories I've ever seen. And we've got great stories from the anchors and great stories from the other subs, and it's a more science fiction than fantasy book, which I think is always good for us because the fantasy tends to dominate. Most of us are fantasy. Most of our editors are fantasy authors. So this one is a good science fiction anthology. It's got some great science fiction stories in it.
Okay, great. Could you tell us some of the authors, Joshua? Since you have the books, I won't press anybody else.
I can't do it from memory.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm not going to be able to cover them all because that would take all night. But like we have Jeannie Cook, Stephen Lay, Austin Habershaw. All of them have been like past ZNB anchor authors and just authors. And then, you know, we have some sort of newbies, I guess, like Chaz Frenchley and J.C. Bedford, Juliet Kemp, and the ones that Sam mentioned, the one that was kind of an extrapolation of Brave New World by Huxley was Eric Choi. I think that's the one you're talking about, right, Sam? So Eric Choi wrote that one, and the one that he was talking about that was great, like humorous and with oh crap, I just lost it.
3D printing.
3D printing. And where the hell is it? Jack Nichols. Jack Nichols was the one that wrote that, and it was Transubstantiation was the title of it, and it's like that one was. It came in relatively early in the
yes, it did.
file, and it was like I marked it immediately, you know, as like, okay, this is a keeper, which doesn't always necessarily translate to we keep it, but this one we did. So yeah, all of the authors were great, even if I didn't mention their name just now. But and like you said, all of the stories are very, very good in that one. I'm very proud of that one.
Okay, well, I may actually read it even though it has a science fictional bent, which is, considering that my taste runs towards two of the other anthologies, the two other anthologies are more my usual drill, one being noir and the other being Shattering the Glass Slipper. So could you tell us a little bit about those two? Because, hey, they're all... It was a particularly strong slate for this year, I will say. So.
Yeah. I think we had really strong themes last year. So yeah, the one of them is the noir one. I kind of feel like the titles speak for themselves on both of these, but this one is science fiction and fantasy, noirish, like mysteries, and it's edited by David Coe and John Zakor. John Zakor is the one that actually proposed the theme. And he proposed it ages ago, like probably 8 years ago. And I finally got around to it. And I kept he kept pestering me about it. And I kept telling him, you know, it's on my list. But like I said, it wasn't fitting with other themes year to year and whatnot. So, but this time it fit. And you know, the nice thing about this one is that it's not just fantasy or sci-fi. It's got a very strong mix of fantasy stories and sci-fi stories. And, you know, and then they're all mysteries, of course. So just some of the people that are in this one. We have Hal Bodner, Esther Friesner, who we love because she always brings the humor in a good way. So Esther Friesner and Alex Bledsoe, he wrote a story that ties into his main universe from all of his novels. And then this is kind of rare, but Andreja Popovich has been a Zombies Need Brains anchor author for like 3 or 4 anthologies in the past. And I've just been so impressed with his writing that I bumped him up to an anchor author for this one. So because I knew he was really into noir. So it was like a perfect fit. But we got like Julie Zerneda and you know, David Coe wrote a story under his D.B. Jackson persona, and another strong author, Stephen Harper, who's been in past anthologies, and I think is a very strong writer that people should keep an eye on and whatnot. So so those are just some of.
Is that Stephen Harper Physics?
Yes, yeah. Stephen Harper. He in his byline, I guess, or pseudonym or whatever for the stories is Stephen Harper. He doesn't use the physics part of it.
I don't think I ever noticed that before.
Yeah, and but like really good, strong stories. I read like half of the stories that came in through the slush pile for this, even though I wasn't an editor, because I like to see what's going on.
Because you're a masochist.
Yes, I am. So yeah, really, really good stories submitted for this. I know it was hard for them to narrow it down to just the 15 that we ended up going with, but yeah, noir, if you like mysteries and you like a little touch of sci-fi fantasy in your mysteries, then definitely pick this up. And then the other one was Shattering the Glass Slipper. Not very good lighting here. Shattering the Glass Slipper obviously is sort of retold fairy tales, or at least stories that have the fairy tale feel to them. And again, what was interesting about this one is we did want some sci-fi interpretations of fairy tales, and so we got that. So this one's edited by Crystal Sarakas and Rondi Salsitz. Crystal's edited for us before. She did My Battery is Low and It Is Getting Dark. She edited that with me. So she and Rondi is the one that proposed the theme. So yeah, a lot of interesting retellings, so to speak, of these fairy tales. And I mean, some of them I think you'll know right away, like what the retelling is supposed to be referring to. And other ones I think, it might be a little more obscure, maybe not a fairy tale you're familiar with. So some really good ones in this one. And again, they go all across the spectrum from light to dark and whatnot. Let's see, we got like Marie Brennan. She actually has a story in this one, and she was not an anchor. She actually submitted something through the slush pile, and
Interesting.
And let's see, we've got R.J. Blaine, Rachel Swirsky, Kat Rambo. Patricia is not an editor on this one, but she was one of the anchors for this, wrote a story called Goblin King for this one. And then we got Jose Pablo Iriarte. I probably pronounced that wrong. But like this year, his name has skyrocketed. He's up for like a Hugo and a Nebula and all of that. For
a story about math.
And with a story about math.
Extra hard for that.
Yeah, proof by induction.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like I said, we seem to be drawing some, stellar authors, and that's one of the reasons I like to run the open call. Not too many anthologies actually do open calls. It seems to me, anyway. But that's one of the reasons I like to run them is that we find a lot of really cool new names for sci-fi and fantasy by doing the open call.
Did we get anybody? Did we get anybody new this year? Any first-time author this year?
For Brand New Worlds?
For any of them, for any of the three.
Oh yeah. We almost always have at least one that's like never been published professionally before.
Yeah.
And we always seem to find one. We're not specifically looking for it. It just seems to happen. So yeah, I know that we have a couple that this is their very first pro publication, and in some cases their very first publication period. So pro or not, and so yeah, and I like to find new voices. So, and you can't really, it's hard to do that if you're not doing open calls. So yeah, those are the three new ones this year. You should be able to find them right now on the shelf.
Right. Certainly, on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble or your favorite online bookseller.
Yeah.
And I do want to emphasize that the open call only happens if the Kickstarter funds.
Yes.
So all the authors watching this video, the Kickstarter needs to fund, and every dollar helps. So anyway, on that note, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and I want you all to tell folks where they can, find your work, what your most recent work is, and where they can find you on the web. I'm going to start with you, Edmund.
Sure. My website is edmundrschubert.com. My most recent book is a collection of my short stories. It's called This Giant Leap. It was published by Falstaff Books. I'm really proud of that one. I also got a nonfiction book out. It's a few years old at this point, but I did it with David, who I'm co-editing this anthology, and Faith Hunter and Misty Massey and AJ Hartley, called How to Write Magical Words, which is specifically about writing this great fantasy that we're looking for. And that's another project that I always like to mention because I'm particularly proud of that book. So those are the two.
Okay, great. And they're wherever fine ebooks and books are sold, right?
Always.
Okay. And Sam?
I have as I said, very irregularly updated website called Mutable Books, mutablepooks.com. I also have a presence on Facebook at SC Butler on Facebook. My most recent project, actually, I had something I finished about a year ago, which I'm still very lazily working on the cover art for. Otherwise, it would be out. But it's hopefully I'll finally get it out by the next couple of months or so. And it's basically a middle grade book for adults. It's a book that, I unsuccessfully tried to sell to anybody as a middle grade book because it really doesn't, it's not a book for kids. The theme of the book is, it's called The Slide Away. And it's about a girl who discovers she can't do magic, meaning it's set in our world. And she discovers that she actually does have magical powers and can do magic, but there's a problem. It turns out that if she ever does magic ever, it hurts people. So she has to learn as a 10, 11, 12-year-old not to do magic. And that's the whole point of the book. I like it a lot, but it's obviously not what the typical 12-year-old would want to read. So that's why I started calling it a middle grade book for adults, which hopefully I will have out sometime in the next 2 or 3 months.
Cool. Very cool. Stephen.
If people want to check out my stuff, the best way is probably, I have a collection of some of my previously published stuff called 7 Against Tomorrow. That's available in ebook everywhere, print on Amazon. You can check out my website, which is Cottowicz.com, Kotowych.com. I'm probably going to be posting a couple of little thoughts about sort of some of the stories that I like that involve games and sort of what draws me to them. So if people are looking for hints as to what might attract me as an editor. And if you're interested in checking out that Tesla podcast I do, you can find that at teslapodcast.com.
Cool. One of the real life science fictional heroes. Yeah. He was
Indeed.
he
was something else.
Yeah, stuff that we still haven't caught up with. That's for sure. And but what was the thing about pearl earrings? And anyway, yeah, I know my mind is filled with trivia, Joshua. By this point, you should know that. Anyway, Joshua, what about you? What's your current work? Where can folks find you on the web?
Well, first I want to say it wasn't just pearl earrings. It was just pearls in general. For some reason, he did not like pearls. Okay. You can find me as an author at joshuapalmatier.com. And my most recent trilogy starts with Shattering the Lay, which is only $2.99 in ebook if you want to try it out. And for the small press, you can find us at zombiesneedbrains.com. There's links to pretty much everything there at zombiesneedbrains.com. But if you're looking for the Kickstarter in particular, there's a tinyurl.com/ ZNB Kickstarter 2022. That will take you there. But again, you can go to zombiesneedbrains.com and there'll be a link there. Also a link to the Zombies online store. And I want to just say in general for everybody, if you are interested in seeing what we're interested in as editors, I mean, the best thing you can do, and I'm not saying this just to plug our stuff, but the best thing you can do is read our past stuff. I mean, if you read our past stuff, you'll get an idea of what it is we'd like to buy. So, you know, read our past stuff. And I do want to say that, like, for example, if you're looking for Sam's trilogy from Tor, there is a reward level in the Kickstarter where you can get signed copies of Sam's trilogy. And that's true for a lot of the other editors and anchor authors and stuff as well. So keep that in mind. Check out the Kickstarter, see what's there, and up for grabs.
Great. And we will put that URL in the credits, as we will put everyone's websites. So if they pass by too fast for you to see it, it'll be there. Okay, that wraps it up for this edition of Continuals. Zombies Need Brains Takeover. Again, thank you all for joining us here and talking about Zombies Need Brains. And thank you out there from Continual, the convention that's always here when you want to have fun.